Good morning, everybody, or I should say afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. My name is Amy Tossenson, and as you can see from this slide, I'm the Associate Director of International Admission at St. Catherine University. And a little bit about my background. I have been working in international admissions for over 15 years. And one of the best things about my job is that I get to help young people like yourself reach their goals, get a good education, and also I can help to demystify the process of applying to universities in the United States. It can be complicated. So what we're going to do today is I first want to thank Education USA and College Week Live for letting me have this opportunity to talk to you today. What we're going to do is we're going to do the presentation first, and then at the end I'll answer any questions that you have. You can type them into the little question box, and then we'll go through those at the end because I might answer some of your questions as we go along. I hope you get all your questions answered, and I want to thank you too for listening, for attending. You're taking a good first step by being on the line with us today and learning about all of your options. So today we're going to talk about undergraduate admissions and funding. But before we start, what I would like to do is just tell you very, very briefly about the university where I work. And I have worked here for quite a while. So I represent St. Catherine University, and we have about 5,000 students. We're considered a comprehensive university, so that means we offer associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and doctoral degrees. Now, the unique thing about my university is that at the bachelor's level, we are a university for women. There are about 46 universities for women in the United States, and we are one of the largest. We admit men and women to our associate, master's, and PhD programs. So it's the college for women that has about 2,000 students in it, and that is the college for women. We are located in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is right in the middle of the country, in the north. So it's a bit northwest of Chicago. That's kind of a locator for you. We have 4 seasons, so you get to see snow if you come here. It gets very warm in the summer too. We are located in a very safe and friendly area of the country called the Midwest. And also we are in our category, we're number 13 on the U.S. News and World Report's top 20 Midwestern universities. So you might guess from our name that we are affiliated with the Catholic Church. That is true. But we are welcoming to students of all faiths and ethnic backgrounds. So you don't have to be Catholic to come to school at St. Catherine University. The last statistic I saw was that about 30% of our students are Catholic. So about 70% are not. And we actually have a very active Muslim student association. We have students from all different faiths. And we have a partial scholarship program for students in our bachelor's degree program. So that's all I'll say about St. Catherine University. You can see the website there. If you are interested, you can feel free to contact me after the webinar, and I'll have my contact details at the end. So moving along. Okay, so there are a few key concepts that it's important to understand about U.S. higher education so that you can kind of get a sense of how that will affect your application process. So the first thing that's really important when you're looking at universities and colleges in the United States is that you look at the accreditation. Now you'll see in the slide there that I have there's a map of the United States broken down into different regions. So there's no Ministry of Education in the United States that accredits all institutions. It's more these regional accrediting bodies, and it's through the Higher Learning Commission. But the accrediting body for my university is in the North Central region, because you can kind of see that blue area where my university is located. It's actually a pretty big section of the United States. So another thing to know about education in the United States is that we kind of use the words college and university interchangeably, meaning we use them in the same way. So generally speaking, colleges and universities have the same academic reputation in the United States. So I know in some countries if you go to a college it might be a high school. That's not the case in the United States. Colleges are generally more focused on undergraduate education, which we'll talk about today, and universities have a wider range, generally speaking, of program offerings. Program length. We're going to talk about bachelor's and associate degrees today, but you can actually, because the system is so flexible, you can actually complete those programs in different lengths of time. So if you take more classes during the summer, you can earn your degree in shorter amounts of time, or you can extend into 5th year if you needed to go longer for a bachelor's degree, that type of thing. Another characteristic of the U.S. higher education system is that it's very flexible. This is very unique. In fact, when you start a program, generally speaking, at a U.S. college or university, you sometimes don't even have to say exactly what you want your major to be. At most universities, one of the most popular majors coming in is actually undecided or deciding. And that's for myself. When I did my undergraduate degree, I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but I wasn't exactly sure. So it's flexible. And sometimes people will change majors. For example, I have a friend who changed his major, 5 or 6 times. It took him a little bit longer to get his degree, but he did it. So it's very flexible. So if you intend to study a certain area, then you can take a few years to decide if that's really the right thing for you. So it's very flexible. One other note that I wanted to say about higher education too is that generally there isn't a very big distinction between private and public. Both are equally academically rigorous. So I know in some countries the private universities are better or the public universities, but generally speaking they're on the same level in the United States. So what are we talking about when we say what is an undergraduate program? There is a lot of terminology in U.S. higher education that can be a little bit confusing. So one of the things we want to do is make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. So an undergraduate program is usually considered an associate degree or a bachelor's degree. So after completing high school, you'll see the part that's in the little red circle. After high school graduation, people can go on to do a 2-year associate degree or a 4-year bachelor's degree. Or they can do a combination of the two. So say somebody starts out with a 2-year associate degree, then they transfer to a bachelor's degree, and then they have the additional 2 years to go. So that's kind of what's on the left-hand side there. Excuse me. You can see the 2 years for the associate degree, and then the additional 2 years for the bachelor's degree. So that's the focus of what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so within these different areas, you have a lot of choices. There are about 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States. The first type of institution is called a community college. This is really very common in the United States for students to start at a community college and then transfer to a bachelor's level program to finish their bachelor's degree. So there's about 1,280 institutions that are community colleges in the United States. And generally speaking, they have something called open admission, which means that if you meet the criteria, you can have a space. Usually they have a mission to have access for many people. That's their admission guideline. And a lot of the community colleges in the St. Paul, Minneapolis area where I am located, we have articulation guides with our local community colleges. So what that means is that if you study at a 2-year institution, then you apply to my university, St. Catherine University, as a transfer student. And we would give you the credits, and we have that all figured out before you start, so you know how long it will take you to get your bachelor's degree. And most community colleges have a transfer center or someone who's in charge of that process that helps the students transfer if that's what they want to do. Another great thing about community colleges is that generally they're less expensive than some other institutions. So if you're looking at your budget and you want to get a bachelor's degree, but you might have some financial restrictions, you can start at a community college and then pretty much go anywhere. Most universities and colleges in the United States will take transfer students. Another benefit of community colleges is that they have usually smaller class sizes. So that's a good thing too, because you get lots of attention from your professors. So some things about private colleges and universities. My university is a private university, St. Catherine University, and there are about 2,000 institutions in the United States. The unique thing about private colleges, it means that they're usually funded by tuition. So that means that the students coming in, they pay their fees and they pay their tuition. That's how the university or college gets its money to operate. Sometimes private colleges and universities will have specific affiliations. Like I mentioned, St. Catherine University is affiliated with the Catholic Church. Some other colleges and universities have other religious affiliations. Sometimes the affiliations are very strong, sometimes they're more historical in nature. So you'll have to investigate each institution that you're interested in. Some universities are also for special populations. For example, I mentioned that our bachelor's level program is for women. So that's considered a special population. There are a few colleges and universities for men only in the United States as well. Small class size. So usually at private colleges and universities you also will have small classes. And one thing you can ask when you're applying is what the faculty to student ratio is. That will give you a good sense of how many students there are for each professor. And you can also ask what the average class size is. At St. Catherine University, it's about 18 students per class is the average, and our faculty to student ratio is 1 to 11. Public colleges and universities. So there are about 640 institutions like this in the United States, and they receive their funding predominantly from the government, from the state government. So different states will allot different amounts per student for each university. And some of them also are land grant institutions, which means the state gave the university land to operate. And they have sort of a mandate from the state to educate the population in that state. And this is the kind of institution where you will find in-state tuition and out-of-state tuition. So in Minnesota, usually students from Minnesota will pay a lower rate at like the University of Minnesota than someone from a different state or an international student. Different parts of a public college and university will focus on research or the liberal arts. The liberal arts is the idea that you need to be broadly educated, that you'll be taking classes in a lot of different areas. And generally speaking, public colleges and universities are comprehensive, meaning they will offer a wide range of academic offerings at different levels. Okay, so let's get into the big burning question of what do admission offices want? So the first thing that you should understand is that the purpose of the admissions process is to make sure that you are a good fit with the university that you are applying to. So one of the most important things that the admission office will want to look at is how you're doing in your classes. Are you a good student? Then what we do is we look at your curriculum. So we want to know if you have taken classes that challenge you. Did you take all easy classes? Did you take some classes that stretched you? If you took a really challenging academic program and maybe you got B's, that actually might be better than taking easy classes and getting all A's. We want to see what kind of student you are. So some schools will have different criteria. It will all depend on the selectivity of the institution. So that's something also that you need to investigate. So usually when we're asking for grades at the undergraduate level, we mean your grades from high school. And then if you've already graduated high school and you're going to be a transfer student, we will also want to see those grades from the university or the community college, wherever you have gone. Sometimes I work with students who've had maybe something happen to them during their high school career where their grades don't look quite so great for one semester, or they did really badly in a class. What I would recommend is that when you're applying, if there is something like that in your academic record, that you attach a letter of explanation as to why that happened. Also, depending on the curriculum of your high school, if you took advanced placement, international baccalaureate, or advanced level classes, sometimes you can get advanced standing or transfer credits for those high school courses, and that can shorten the amount of time it takes you to earn your degree. So test scores, we have the icons of 4 of the big ones there. Minimally, the university will want to know that you are able to understand academic English. And usually students will demonstrate those abilities by taking the TOEFL or the IELTS. So that's important. Now, a lot of universities are SAT or ACT optional, so you will have to check and make sure for each university what they want. One of the things that I should mention too is that because the U.S. higher education system is so flexible, it's also very decentralized. That means that each university will set its own admission requirements and policies. So there isn't just one way to apply to university in the United States. You need to pick the universities that you're interested in and then talk to the admission counselor there and make sure that you understand what that university's specific requirements are. So for example, my institution is SAT optional. People don't have to send their SAT results. But if they want to, they can, but we do require the TOEFL and the IELTS. So you need to check with each institution. Some universities will also look at your class rank. Were you really highly ranked in your class or not? Some universities don't look at that at all. So again, it will depend. So we talked about the academic requirements in the last slide. These are some other things that other universities might ask for, just as an example. And I would recommend that you make sure that each institution actually needs the items before you go to the effort of trying to get them all collected and send them to them. The essay. This is usually a personal statement or an essay that you write. The idea in the admission process in the United States is we want to get to know you as a person. We don't usually exclusively look at the grades if the admission process is considered a holistic process. We want to know about you, your personality, your interests, and so you need to use the essay as a way to be thoughtful, make it unique to you, and help you showcase your own unique abilities, how you stand out from the crowd of other applicants in the applicant pool. You also will use it to highlight your writing skills. And also you need to answer the question. Sometimes the essay will be very open-ended, meaning they say you can write about whatever you want, but sometimes they have a specific question. And nothing looks worse than writing an essay about something that the university has not asked or not addressing the question. So be very careful with that. Another tip, a couple times I have had people send me essays where they put the wrong university name in the essay, and that looks really bad. I would say you need to have somebody help you go through and edit and make sure that everything looks good on your statement and you don't put the wrong university name. That just does not look good in the admission process. So the next item, sometimes universities will ask for letters of recommendation. Usually you'll want to get a recommendation from a teacher or a guidance counselor who has known you well in an academic context, who can talk about your extracurricular activities, your special qualities, your ability as a student. The recommendation letter doesn't need to be from someone like a teacher where you've gotten an A. If you've done, if you had a challenge in a class and overcame it, that might actually be, the teacher talking about how you address that might be a really great way to show how you work as a student. So you'll check and see at each institution how many letters of recommendation you need, and then approach your teachers or a guidance counselor. Sometimes you can also submit recommendations from, if you've done volunteer work, from your supervisor, or you've done some work work for pay from your supervisor there too. Okay, the next one is your extracurricular activities. Usually you don't need to list every single thing that you have ever done in your entire high school career. You want to make sure that the extracurriculars that you highlight are meaningful and how they're meaningful for you. It shows that you will be an involved student once you get to the campus that you choose in the United States. So that's one thing that we look at. So some examples of what you would list would be if you were in any honors programs, if you were on any sports teams, did any competitions, if you did community service, or you have a special artistic ability, if you've been involved in any school publications, clubs, done leadership. You could even put work experience here. So you just want to make sure that you get a sampling of what is really meaningful to you. At certain schools, you may also want to submit a portfolio or an audition. Usually with the portfolio, that would be if you're applying to a specific art school and they need to see your work samples, or an audition, maybe if you want to study music and you want to send a video or something of your performance so that they can see if you're a good match with their program. You want to check and make sure that if you need to send a portfolio or do auditions, you need to make sure that you send them to the right person. Sometimes it's not the admission officer. Sometimes you need to send them to the music department, the design department, so just make sure to double check on that before you send it. Because it might, if you send it to the wrong person, it might just end up in a drawer, never get looked at. So you just want to make sure to check. This is why it's so important to have good communication with your admission counselor. And then interviews. Sometimes interviews are required, sometimes they're not. Sometimes if you're in the United States and you want to visit the campus you're interested in, you can do the interview then. Some universities will do interviews via Skype or other sort of instant video system. Or sometimes international admission representatives actually travel to different countries, and you can set up a time to meet them, maybe if they're in your home city or something like that. Okay, how do I apply? So you all get a gold star. That means you're doing really well by listening to this webinar today and starting the process this way, getting real general information. You need to do your research. Some great resources for you are Education USA and College Week Live, because they're putting on this series of presentations today for international students. Some other good resources are the College Board. The College Board has a lot of good information on their website. Princeton Review is also another good resource. So you have to do your research. And actually with the Education USA advising centers, you can usually find an actual person, an advisor in your home country who can also help you with the application process. So the actual application, there are a variety of ways that you can submit your application. The old-fashioned way is to do it by paper. Most universities will have their application online, or you can also use the Common Application. The Common Application is a group of universities who have all agreed to accept one form. So you go to the Common Application website, and then you can submit multiple applications to many schools at the same time. It's quite, I believe the Common App has been having a few technical difficulties this year, but I'm sure that those will get ironed out and you'll be able to submit them very easily. So, some tips for the application process are, you want to make sure that your application has the exact same name on it as is in your passport. Sometimes people use different variations of their name, but it's very important to have it match what's on your passport and then have that be consistent in all of your things that you submit. When you're filling out the application, make sure to answer all of the questions. The questions are there for a reason. They're things that we need to know in order to make the decision or move the process forward for you. So make sure you answer all of the questions. You might also need translations of documents that are not in English. And you'll want to check if there is an application fee. Some universities have application fees, some do not. And again, if I haven't stressed it enough, you want to stay in communication with your admission officer at each institution. You also need to be really aware of deadlines. So there's a lot of different deadlines, and sometimes if you miss a deadline, it might mean the difference between being admitted or not, or getting financial aid or not. So it's really important. And then you need to schedule your tests. We talked earlier about the SAT, ACT, TOEFL, IELTS. Make sure that you schedule the tests and take them so that the results can reach the admission office in time. So how will the admission office look at my application? How will I be evaluated? A lot of it depends on the admission policy and the admission philosophy of the university. The threshold admission means that if you meet the requirements, you are granted a spot. Usually that's the academic requirements, versus a holistic evaluation, which means that the university is looking at your grades, it's looking at your essay, it's looking at your letters of recommendation. Sometimes at universities they'll want to know if you have a relative or a friend who has graduated from that institution. That's what legacy or heritage is referring to. So usually there'll be a question on the application about that. Do you have a special talent? Are you an athlete? Are you a musician? Do you have some unique quality that makes you stand out from the crowd? That's something that they will want to know about. Part of the evaluation also can be related to financial need. It's not realistic to expect that you will find a university that will give you a full scholarship. Sometimes universities will be need blind, meaning they won't even look at the financial aspect before they review your application for admission. And sometimes they are need sensitive, which means that they will take a look at that. It may or may not influence the admission decision. Another final thing is class composition. With the more selective universities, this is something that they really try to get at. They want to have a mix of people who are interested in sciences, who are interested in arts, who are good athletes, who can fulfill all these different roles to give a good class composition. People with a variety of interests, because usually diversity amongst our students is something that we're looking for in the United States in the admission process. So now, I've gotten into my university of choice. How do I fund my studies? There are a variety of resources, and actually I think Education USA has a great list on their website of universities that provide scholarships to international students. So the scholarships can be either academically based or merit based. What that means is that they're going to look at your grades, look at your accomplishments, and that's the determining factor for the scholarship. Need-based aid looks more at your family's financial resources. If you are a needy student, maybe you would get a need-based grant or something like that. Some universities will also offer specific scholarships for talent or athletic scholarships. An important thing about athletic scholarships, though, is that it will depend on the athletic division, the WAA, National Collegiate Athletic Association division. So Division I schools and Division II schools are allowed to give athletic scholarships. Division III schools, like my institution, usually they're a little bit smaller, are not allowed to give athletic scholarships. It's just part of the regulations that we work within. So you need to check and see if you're a very serious athlete, check which division the university you are applying to is, and that will help you figure out whether or not you might get an athletic scholarship. You also need to register with the NCAA to register as an international student. So that's another process that you need to go through. All right. And really, in terms of financial aid and the institutions, we see the scholarship process as a partnership between our university and the student and his or her family. So it's a partnership. That's an important concept to understand. You will also want to ask your admission counselor, how do I apply for scholarships, be they academic, merit-based, need-based? Sometimes you have to fill out an extra scholarship application form. Sometimes it's automatic. Do you need to fill in an institutional form? Do you have to fill in the standard College Board, International Student Financial Aid application? That's another thing to check out. Another important thing to remember is that you need to get admitted to the university first before they will be able to tell you how much scholarship you might be able to receive. If you send an email to an admission officer saying, hi, my name is such and so, I'm a student from Nepal, how much scholarship will I get from your university? They can probably tell you the range of scholarship, but they don't know enough about you yet to know that if you would even qualify. So make sure that you are going through the application process while you're asking about the financial aid. Oh, external scholarships too. You may be eligible for some scholarships from your government. I have worked with students who have had government scholarships. I have worked with students who have had scholarships from their parents' employer. There are sometimes foundations that might have a certain criteria. There's a scholarship that I know of for Polish citizens that helps them come to Minnesota private colleges and universities. So you can also utilize the Education USA advising centers to research this if there are any external scholarships you might be eligible for. So when you are after you're accepted and you get your financial aid package, you can expect to see some of these types of things in your award. Scholarships or grants. That's money that you do not have to pay back. That's the partnership between you and the university that they're saying, we believe that you are a good student, we are going to give you a scholarship. Usually you will have to contribute some personal funding, either from yourself or your parents, or if you have a sponsor, then that sponsor would also contribute some funding toward your educational expenses. Sometimes you might be eligible for a loan. If you're looking for a loan in the United States, you will generally need a credit-worthy U.S. citizen or permanent resident to co-sign on the loan. The co-signer means that if you do not pay back the loan, the co-signer will pay it back for you. Most U.S. banks will want that to show that there's another financial guarantee so that they'll get their money back. Some countries do have educational loan programs through banks, so you can investigate that and see if that's an option for you. Sometimes even the university might have an institutional loan program. So you can ask your admission counselor if there's a way that you can get a loan through the university. That's sometimes an option. Student work. That's actually one of the standard parts of a financial aid package at St. Catherine University. We award all new international students an on-campus job. The thing is that there are immigration regulations about how much a student can work. Because if you come on a student visa, your primary purpose is to be a student, not to be a worker. So the limit right now is 20 hours a week while school is in session that you can work. Students will work in all sorts of different jobs on campus. Some of them work in the library, on the grounds crew, in clerical positions throughout the university. So you need to look at this as sort of a supplement to your financial aid package. You can't fund your entire education through student work. It's just not possible because of the limitations on working in the United States. And those limitations are from the U.S. Immigration Service. They're not from the universities themselves. So it will be the same no matter where you study. Okay, so how will you manage this process of financial aid successfully? You need to really have a very honest and thoughtful discussion with your parents and sponsors about how much they will be able to afford to contribute for your educational experience in the United States, be that an associate degree or a bachelor's degree. As I mentioned earlier, full scholarships are not that common, so when you're developing your plan, you want to make sure that you can fund the entire length of your studies. If you spend all of the money that you have just for the first year, that will put you in a very difficult situation the second year, because usually the scholarships, the financial aid package won't change that much from year to year. They might be some slight changes, but if you have no money left for your second year, that's going to put you in a very stressful position. You won't be able to focus on your studies because you'll be so worried about paying your bill. So you want to balance your ability to pay with the institution that you choose. And when you're looking at the financial aid packages, say you're accepted to 5 schools, you've gotten 5 financial aid packages, make sure to not only look at the amount of the scholarship, but what your remaining cost will be. Because you might get a $10,000 scholarship at a really expensive university, or a $6,000 scholarship at a less expensive university, and they might end up being fairly similar. So always look at the final cost of attendance, not just the scholarship amount. Another question to ask is, will the cost increase every year? That's pretty common. I would say usually tuition costs increase every year from maybe 2% up to 7%. So you want to make sure that you understand how the costs will change from year to year. And also, if the tuition is charged on a cost per credit, meaning that the more credits you take, the more expensive it will be, or is there a range of credits you can take for one tuition price? That's more like a flat fee for a band or a certain number of credits that you take each year. And also, if you plan to stay in the United States over the summer, can you study during the summer? Can you make more academic progress that way and earn your degree more quickly? Is that allowed within the financial aid package? So education really is an investment in your future. You can't expect that the university will cover all of your costs, but through your research, I'm confident that you can find universities that will be a good match with your academics and your ability to pay for your education. So that is the end of my official presentation. So this is my contact information. You can feel free to contact me via email, or I'm also on Skype. But right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the question box here and see what questions we have here. Let me just take a look. Okay, let's see here. Okay. Okay, so here's a question. I am currently in 11th grade in India, and I want to apply for Princeton or Caltech, mainly the top ones, and do a course on applied and pure science. How do I apply and be more familiar with the TOEFL and SAT, as I have never written one? And how do I manage my tuition fees, as that's the main concern I am facing right now? So we talked about this a little bit. The Education USA Advising Centers will be able to get you in touch with the TOEFL testing centers. Sometimes they have the TOEFL testing centers right there in their center, and you can sometimes do practice tests. That is something that I would really recommend. So before you go in and sit for the SAT or the TOEFL exam, take a practice test. Then you can get a sense of how the exam works, what kinds of things they're likely to ask you. It's always good to practice beforehand. So with your question specifically about Princeton or Caltech, you need to be in communication with them and find out their specific admission requirements. Since I don't work there, I can't answer that specifically. The system is so decentralized that both of those institutions will likely be slightly different. And then how do you manage your tuition fees? That is something that you have to talk with your family about. But you can also ask the institutions what their payment plan options are. That's not something I mentioned earlier. Sometimes you can pay this. Usually the standard payment practice is that you pay your first semester at the beginning of the first semester, and then each following semester you pay the fees for that semester. Sometimes there will be more flexible payment plans, like you could pay you know, a monthly payment that's slightly smaller. Sometimes you can set that up to be done automatically. So talk with your admission counselor at those institutions about the best way to do that. Okay, let's see what the next question is. It's just taking me a little time to scroll through here. Okay, so here's a good question. What happens if my school doesn't have extra classes or different options? That is something that the admission counselor wouldn't be a detriment to you, because we'll look at what's offered at your high school and what you have done. So if there is no International Baccalaureate or AP exams, that type of thing, it's not going to be a negative thing on your application. It's just if your school offers these advanced things and you've not chosen to do them, that they might think about that. Like, does this student want to challenge him or herself? But I don't think that you should worry if you've taken challenging academic classes in the curriculum that you have at your high school. That's what we're looking for. So, okay, I think we talked a little bit about this. Would you advise us to explain that, an explanation of a drop in grades in our personal statement, or no? I would say that with the personal statement, you want to address the question. If your explanation about your grades doesn't fit into that essay, then don't write about it there. But if it's a more open-ended question and it flows and it makes sense for you to mention it there, you could include it. But really, I think it's better to write a separate explanation about that in particular. Just because if it's not addressing the essay question, then it won't be evaluated quite as well. Does that make sense? I hope so. Okay. Okay, here's a good question. What if my SAT score isn't very good, but my IB exam score is? So, as an admission officer, I realize that sometimes students' academic abilities are different than their test-taking abilities. So sometimes we'll see students who have excellent grades, but they haven't done very well on their SAT. You should check with the university and see if the SAT score is required. If you've not done well on the SAT and it's not required, then I would say don't submit it. But if your IB exam score is, then that shows that within the curriculum that you've been studying under, you've been successful, you've done well. And actually, if you've done really well in your IB exams, you can get advanced standing or maybe a couple classes taken off of how many classes you need to do to earn your degree. So I would say, and again, it will depend on the university, because sometimes universities do look at SAT score or other standardized tests when they're doing scholarship evaluations. But speaking for my institution, I would give more weight to the IB exam score because it's the curriculum that you've been studying in, and the SAT is not. It's an external exam. There's no curriculum for the SAT. So let's see here. Okay. What happens if you're doing the IB and some of the courses are not your strongest, as they are challenging to you, but the other classes are high grades? Would that greatly affect the admission decision for that individual? It, again, will depend on the admission philosophy of the academic institution you're applying to, but generally speaking, it's good to see that students are challenging themselves academically. So even if you haven't gotten straight A's, if you've taken difficult classes, that shows that you're a serious student. So I think that's actually to your advantage, that you've challenged yourself. But again, that is something too that you want to talk through with your admission officer. Again, communication with the admission officer is very important. Any advice for students that are struggling to write their personal statement? I think, like I said, it's a time for you to express yourself. So it might be good for you to talk with someone, maybe brainstorm ideas about what you want to put in your personal statement. Some of the Education USA advising centers will have workshops on how to write your personal statement. There are, sometimes you can search online for guides or ways to start ideas flowing, but again, always make sure that it relates back to the question that the university is asking of you. For the essay, is it better to keep it simple yet well-structured rather than using big words? I would say yes. Especially if you're not a native English speaker, sometimes if you throw in too many big words, it gets distracting, and the admission officer might think, well, this student maybe just went through the thesaurus or the dictionary and tried to throw in some extra fancy words. You want to have the essay reflect the way you talk and the way you are able to structure something in English. So I would say simple and well-structured is way better than just putting in some fancy big words that might be distracting to the person reading your statement. As an international student and someone who needs some sort of scholarship, do I need to fill in the CSSS financial aid profile? That will depend on the institution. So you want to make sure that when you pick your 5 to 10 or however many universities you're applying to, ask them, because it will be different for each institution. So sorry, I don't have a standard answer for that. The standard answer actually is, it depends on the institution, unfortunately, which means more work for you. So that's just the way it is. Okay, this student asked, I'm a student of English literature, but I have no IELTS or TOEFL score. What can I do? Please tell me. You will need to see if that is something that the university requires. And then if it is, contact the Education USA Advising Center nearest you, take some practice tests, and then you will need to submit the score. Some universities actually will do something called Conditional Admission. This is if a student says, I believe that I'm academically qualified, but I need to have some more time to study English. That's something that we sometimes do at St. Catherine University. If everything looks good and the TOEFL score is a little bit low, we won't say you can't come to our university. What we'll say is that you're a good academic fit, but you need to study English first. So we will conditionally admit you, and then when you retake the TOEFL or take the TOEFL or IELTS again, and you meet that minimum, then you will be ready to start your program. So you can also investigate whether conditional admission option is available to you at that institution. Okay. For the portfolios, do universities prefer online portfolios or mail portfolios in order to have a physical copy? My university doesn't actually require portfolios, so again, I would recommend that you contact the admission officer at the institution and find out what their best way to do it would be. Because if you send a physical copy and they don't need it, it might just end up in a drawer somewhere and nobody ever looks at it. So again, check with your institution that you're applying to. Okay. Okay, what should I do if I graduated from high school in 2010 and I have recommendation letters from when I graduated? Are the letters too old? Should I get new ones? I would say that the recommendation letters are probably still good. They reflect your abilities at that point in time. So I would say that those are still good, but it might be beneficial for you to get a more recent one, depending on, maybe it could be from, if you've been working, it could be from your employer, if you've been doing some other type of activity where somebody can speak to your abilities. I would say still use those older recommendation letters, but add a newer one. Okay, what happens if you're doing an interview via Skype and the internet connection starts losing power and cuts? Should the one being interviewed call back, or would the university interviewer call back? I think however you can get back in connection is fine. I don't know that an admission officer would mind if you called them back. They will probably try to reach you. Whoever gets to that button first, I would say keep trying. And they'll probably keep trying to get that connection reestablished with you too. Do my extracurricular activities outside of school count? Yes, that is something that most admission offices will look at if they're doing a holistic review, not a threshold review. So I would say they do count, and they show your interests, they show how you are as a person, and whether or not you would be involved then once you become a student on one of our university campuses. Okay, what should I do if the SAT in my country has a later date than the application deadline? That's an excellent question. And again, it goes back to my standard response in that you need to check with your admission officer. Maybe it can be submitted late, or maybe it will come before, if they're using the SAT for financial aid or scholarship decisions, maybe it will still arrive in time. Just make sure to check with your admission officer at each university. For the academic requirements, do schools normally look at your entire school history and reports, or do schools just look at your last academic year? Generally speaking, they would want to see more than 1 year. Because again, remember the idea of the admission process is to make sure that you are a good academic fit with that particular university. So they might not be able to tell that just from 1 year. So I would say that they would look at more than 1 year, maybe 3 to 4 years of secondary school, to show if you are consistently getting good grades, or if you had a slow start and then you got better. They will want to see how you've done during that larger period of time rather than just one academic year. Okay, can I get a combined scholarship or scholarship and aid? So I was using the word financial aid in sort of a general term, like that's the main word, and then there's all different kinds of financial aid underneath that, like scholarships. So it will again depend on how the university that you're applying to structures that. I noticed that some universities say that IB students are eligible for certain scholarships. How does that work? Sometimes you might be able to find this out by looking at the university website, the financial aid page on the website. Or sometimes universities will do just an automatic review of your application, and if you've done the IB, they'll see that and then you'll be eligible for it. But again, it will depend, and you'll have to ask the admission officer there. Okay, so we have about 3 minutes left, I see. So we'll have time for a few more questions. Let me just see. Oh, here's a great question. Is it more difficult for students coming from a homeschooling environment to be accepted into colleges or universities? I've actually worked with several homeschooled applicants, and usually what we have asked students to do is someone who has been in charge of your homeschooling needs to prepare a type of academic transcript for you. And we usually will provide guidelines to that person. So you'll still need to usually submit a transcript, and maybe one of the homeschooled students that I worked with had done homeschooling, but then she had also sat for the final examination in her home country. And that actually made it fairly easy for us to figure out how well she would do by looking at her homeschool transcript and her exam results. So I would say it will depend again on the school, but it shouldn't be a disadvantage to you if you are homeschooled, especially if you've taken the TOEFL or taken the SAT, some sort of standardized exam, and then that comes with your homeschooling transcript. Let's see. Okay, I think this will be the last question. Can I apply for a loan if I have a diplomatic visa? Usually, the visa status has nothing to do with the loan process. It would depend on whether or not you meet the bank's criteria or you have a U.S. citizen or permanent resident as a cosigner. So I think that's all the time we have. I'm so very sorry if I didn't get to your question, because I know there were quite a few. But I hope you have learned a lot, and I hope that you use this as a stepping off point to start your research. And I hope that you, if your dream is to come and study in the United States, I hope that you will find a way to do that. And all of us admission officers are usually very nice people. We're not scary, so make sure to communicate with us. That's sort of my parting words of wisdom. So thank you so much. I appreciate your attention, and have a great rest of your day.